Funding for Public Square provided by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, working to improve the lives of vulnerable children.
This program is part of American Graduate. Let's make it happen. A public media initiative made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
And viewers like you.
I actually grew up seeing trauma my whole life, and I didn't want to be putting that on my kids.
Prior to age 10, trauma, any kind of trauma, has a significantly greater impact than trauma later on in life.
One of the things that I think is the most profound injury when someone experiences repeated trauma or toxic stress is the sense of isolation and alienation and the impact that it has on the attachment of the child or the adult with the people around them.
The kids who are involved in our juvenile justice system at the highest end in New Mexico have 6, 7, 8 very serious adverse childhood experiences of trauma in their early childhood.
We need to have a trauma-informed juvenile justice system that sees these kids as having had these tremendously negative pre-verbal events going on in their lives for which they got almost no help.
If we could say what happened to these kids and why are they doing this? You know, and if we had been able to intervene when they were younger, when they were infants in their first 5 years of life, we would be looking at an incredibly different world.
I think it's an emerging consensus that we have that trauma is driving most of our social deficits, but making that into policy and making that even into treatment modalities is a difficult task.
Welcome to Public Square, where civic dialogue takes center stage.
There's lots of different kinds of trauma, but really the kind of trauma we see in child services, especially children who have been in child protective services or who are in juvenile justice, is trauma that happened during the first year, 3 years, 5 years.
In this program, we discuss an emerging and very important aspect of child well-being, trauma. The latest research is helping us better understand the long-term impact that trauma has on a child's brain. From age 0 to 3, children's brains are forming at an astonishing rate, creating 700 neural connections per second. But when they're confronted with serious traumatic stress, those processes are disrupted. Childhood traumatic stress is triggered by things like neglect and psychological, physical, or sexual abuse. It can also happen as a result of homelessness, community and school violence, and witnessing or experiencing domestic violence, things that are all too common in New Mexico. These adverse childhood experiences cause biochemical changes in the body that often lead to serious health issues later in life. They can also result in more incarceration, depression, and substance abuse. But those changes don't have to be permanent. Humans are resilient, and given the right supports, they can often overcome the effects of trauma. So what are adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs? And how can we as a community better understand the impact of childhood trauma and provide resources to cope with the problem?
That's why it's so important to not only focus on changes in children, but changes on parents.
Our guests include health experts, community advocates, and a young woman working to overcome her own trauma for the future of herself and her children. Our leadership panel includes Dr. George Davis with the Children, Youth, and Families Department, Attorney Yael Cannon with the J. Paul Taylor Task Force, and pediatrician Dr. Andy Shee, who's establishing the Institute of Resiliency, Health, and Justice.
CLN Kids is providing high-quality, trauma-informed early childhood education for the children of homeless families.
You guys see with this little gal.
And at the same time, we're working with the parents to help them become more self-sustaining and acquire housing for them. We know children are highly vulnerable if they've had a series of 4 to 6 adverse events by the time they're 5. We know that they're going to be hypervigilant. They're going to have a different level of cortisol running in their bodies, especially if, in addition, the parent or parents are feeling high anxiety about their housing status or feeling unsafe. The children pick up on that.
Our experience of being homeless was sometimes it was rough and scary, because they had to be around other adults, and we had a lot of bad things happen. And my 5-year-old, she's antisocial. She doesn't like a lot of people, and she would cry a lot because there was too many people. And my kids are not used to being around a lot of strangers, so they met a lot of crazy people. Instead of being, the parent, the impact of being homeless with my children was they went through a lot of mood changes. They became more scared of a lot of people. Their self-esteem is real low and everything.
Sometimes children get involved in events or in situations which are just totally unmanageable to them and traumatic and hurtful. But what happens during the play therapy then is that the child often reenacts experiences. What 2 boys in 2 separate families have done is they've taken an action figure, gone and trashed the large dollhouse, knocked around all the people figures and the furniture in there, throwing them out the door sometimes. And one time I asked one of the kids, "Did you ever see your dad do that?" He said, "Yeah." And I asked him, "Just once or a lot?" He said, "A lot." That trauma is actually often stored in a kind of a primitive part of the brain that hasn't been well developed, evolutionarily speaking. And what adults do is, of course, they communicate verbally, but children communicate much better through play. They're safe in the play therapy room, they're kind of reenacting this, and they're getting a better sense of being able to cope with it. And they end up getting a kind of a sense of mastery over a situation over which they have very little mastery.
There's a direct effect for the children when they don't have those kinds of safe spaces, the ability to trust relationships that they're in. The learning happens when they don't have to be afraid, when they don't have to be on watch, when they don't have to feel that vulnerability and that hypervigilance about what's going on around me. Can I trust? Is somebody going to come up and hit me? Part of trauma-informed work includes helping the children build trust, helping them engage with structures that can be depended upon so that they have some space to build trust, helping them build positive interpersonal relationships both with the children and with adults. So when we have experiences like lunch preparation and they're sitting in a family setting, there's social time while they're eating, there's structure, they each have their own space at the table so there isn't a mad scramble. They have a place and they know what that place is. So these children are learning something of what we might generally call a normalcy in their routines and in their practices, which builds resilience for them. It's also about how the children learn to respect each other, how they learn to take care of themselves, the practices that they have going from cleaning up after lunch, taking care of their plates, going in to brush their teeth, wash their hands, and then the practices in getting set for getting into their nap.
This little boy begins on the top.
So the goal of Circle of Security is to help families to form more healthy attachments. It's a lot of self-awareness, so we look at how we were raised, we look at the things that have affected us, our traumas, our challenges, because that all plays a part in how we parent. So a watch over me moment, and then a help me moment, and then dad comes. Oftentimes when people have experienced trauma or have their own toxic stress that they're dealing with and they're not aware of it, a lot of the times it propagates. So they do the same thing with their children do the same thing with their children do the same thing with their children. So it just ends up being this generational cycle of trauma that isn't broken. Sometimes we can be just like them and we're like, well, this is the way I was raised, so this is what I'm going to do. Sometimes we go the opposite because we're like, I don't want to be anything like them. People have these aha moments of, oh, that's what my parents did, and now I'm doing the same thing, and now I have a choice. I have a choice to do things differently. My hope for the families where they'll be when we're done is more self-awareness, because when we're self-aware, then we can change.
The memories of us being homeless are slowly fading because there's new things going on, and they're starting to move on with their life and not realize, oh, we're not homeless no more. We don't have to worry about all that.
I think it's really important that we understand what the impact of trauma is in our communities because it's such a pervasive problem.
It shows up as emotional instability, difficulty focusing and concentrating. There's never the recognition that this is all secondary to early neglect or early abuse, early traumatic experiences.
Then as adults, they are more likely, many times more likely to develop diabetes, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, coronary heart disease, being more likely to be depressed, more likely to be addicted to something. And this is the kind of a pattern that then they transmit to their kids.
We want to break those cycles, and building resilience and helping them with what I call trauma release is a significant part of making that change.
As a community, it's really important that we start to identify what has happened to people as opposed to what's wrong with them, so that we can start to be able to treat the problems.